right? That's the key. How does it work? How does it help? And also, we're going to just talk a little bit about herbal medicine, because acupuncture, what you don't know, is a part of what's called traditional Chinese medicine, which is a system of healing which includes herbs, acupuncture, and some other stuff that we'll, briefly talk about. So, without further ado, safety first, okay? Acupuncture is a licensed profession, all right? Somebody who has a license to practice has done almost 3,000 hours of training, okay? Training includes, and this is important, clean filament technique, right? So because we're penetrating the skin with the filaments, we need to know how to avoid contamination and infection. So years of clinical training, somebody who's been doing it for a long time is better off performing it than somebody else. And a lack of training increases the side effects, which there are very few, but if you don't know what you're doing, you can really harm people. So what the punchline is, if you hear people talking about dry needling, or your physical therapist, or somebody just decided to start poking you with needles, they're not qualified, and it's a crime in the 3rd degree. Okay? So remember that. Now, let's start with some history. Now, acupuncture dates back to the Stone Age, where people used primitive tools to cause a micro-injury. And here we have some rocks and some porcupine quills. And the legend is that a soldier with shoulder pain went to his doctor to get treated. And after a battle, he had received an arrow wound in his shin, and his shoulder pain stopped. So the doctor put 2 and 2 together and came up with this system called acupuncture. Now you can say, Mike, how do I know those aren't arrowheads and porcupine quills? So, in 1998, there was a mummy that was exhumed in the Alps of all places, not China, but in the Swiss Alps. His name was Otzi, and they found on him he had these tattoos, right? Like these little marks, but they're not decorative, they're not a picture of something. So they kind of put 2 and 2 together and saw that they were on his lower back and his ankles, and he had some degenerative spine condition, like some arthritis of the lower spine. So they put 2 and 2 together and said, they're using the tattooing, this micro-injury response, to help treat this condition. But ironically, he died from the most primitive form of acupuncture. He was shot by an arrow.
Not funny, but funny enough.
Who discovered the mummy? It was actually a ghost mummy, so the people who found it, even the cameramen, died in accident.
Oh, you're thinking of the Egyptian mummy. This was a Swiss mummy. Oh. Anyway, so historically, acupuncture data is compiled into what's called the Huangdi Neijing. Huangdi is like a folk hero. He's like a revered historical character. He's the Yellow Emperor, and he puts this acupuncture information in the first book that we still use today, and that dates back to 221 before the Common Era. Okay. It states that disease is external and not a curse. It's the first time we're saying that, the gods didn't afflict us with a curse. It's actually something going on environmentally that's causing us not to feel good. And humans are a part of the universe and subject to its laws. So we are not separate from nature. We are part of it. That's why when your grandmother yells at you to wear a jacket or bring an umbrella, she's trying to help you avoid any sort of things that can happen. So if we know that the spring and fall is coming, we may want to think about treating our allergies before they become a problem. And living a life that's more harmonious with nature can prolong and prevent disease. A little modern history. 19th century, acupuncture is sort of seen as outdated and silly, and people don't want to participate in it anymore. China wanted more modern medicine. They wanted antibiotics, they wanted stethoscopes, they wanted machines that go ping, right? And then during the Communist Revolution, Uncle Mao fights a battle and he loses and he's forced to retreat. So his forces are sick and suffering, and he says, hey, let's use some acupuncture, and then it becomes China's treasure, right, all of a sudden. And then when he takes power, there's this huge outbreak of viral infections, and he doesn't have the means to really treat it with Western medicine, so he uses herbal medicine and kind of puts 2 and 2 together and puts acupuncture and herbs and makes it into a curriculum, and that's where we get modern traditional Chinese medicine. That's the curriculum we study today. Now, just for a visual effect, what we have here is an acupuncture filament, okay? that basically penetrates the skin, and what we're trying to do is cause just a little bit of harm to kind of wake the body up, okay? And what happens is we penetrate the skin, so mast cells break, and there's a chemical reaction that basically signals to the body, all right, this is the problem, let's deal with it, okay? So if I have a little bit of low back pain that's there all the time, my body's just not going to deal with it unless I need to go to the emergency room. So what we do is we introduce the filament, we cause this reaction, increases circulation in the area, and it helps repair the damage over time. So the best example is to say is that acupuncture reveals where the problem is and requests that the body deal with it. So a filament can cause like a 9-10 emergency room situation in order to treat a 3 to 7 problem, right? So that back pain or that discomfort. I mean, you guys are young, you don't understand, but to give you a frame of reference, if your parents or your dad's complaining about his low back pain that's there all the time, that's the 3 to 7 I'm talking about, that the body doesn't know what to do with. So the acupuncture filament basically says, all right, right here, let's deal with it. Over time, with consistent treatment, we can kind of correct these issues. So finally, the punchline is that once these filaments are in, what happens is in order for the body to avoid further damage, it releases what's called endorphins. Your body doesn't want you running around with these needles in you. So what happens is the body releases what's called endorphins, and these are chemicals inside your body that are there to help with pain in acute situations, right? So like I said, waking up the body to help out over time. Now, what happens is with certain autonomic dysfunction, like stress-related symptoms, like high blood pressure, digestive issues, these endorphins help regulate your autonomic nervous system. Anybody familiar with that? Maybe not. Fight or flight, rest, digest. Okay. So, relieving stress to help with stress-related symptoms. So, just to recap, right? We insert the filament. We cause the injury response, and that increases circulation to the area. So your dad's low back pain. That signal goes through a nerve pathway, right? And you feel that, right? The body's overwhelmed. It no longer feels that 3 to 7 pain. Once that signal gets to the brain, we release endorphins. And why do we want that? Because we want to treat the tissue and restore the tissue locally. We want to block the pain signal so that we don't feel the pain anymore. And then we want to kind of regulate and balance the body. How many things that you don't control, right? You don't control your heart rate. You don't control your digestion. You don't control hormone release. You don't control all of these things, your sleep, when you fall asleep, or when you go to sleep. So these are important functions that we take for granted that need to be addressed. And then ideally, over time, we correct the issue. So, how many science fiction fans do we have here? All right, great. So I don't know if anybody's really paying attention, but what you want to kind of focus on is that in the realm of biotechnology, we're seeing that there's some advancements. So acupuncture being an ancient medicine, we now see that it starts to kind of work in different ways. It's not just about putting the filaments in. We're starting to see, anybody hear of the microbiome, about how the gut bacteria interacts with the body and how it helps? Okay. So there's evidence to show that acupuncture influences your gut bacteria, like helping the good bacteria, right, and suppressing the bad bacteria. Also, we're seeing that the epigenome, right? Everybody knows about genetics, we've heard about it, right? Maybe some people have the genes for diabetes or certain things like that. What we don't take for granted is that genes don't exist in a vacuum, right? Just because we have the genes for a condition doesn't mean that those genes will manifest. It means the environment that we are in, so like lifestyle, diet, eating properly, all these things, McDonald's cheeseburgers, donuts, those aren't good for diabetes, right? So if we stay away from them, or if we use things like acupuncture, we can kind of control how these genes express themselves. And then finally, we're seeing that when we do an acupuncture treatment, we're releasing stem cells. And stem cells are these early, undifferentiated cells that become blood cells, muscle cells, things like that. And they're using them to treat spinal injury, which is a very serious condition. That's acupuncture. We'll talk a little bit about herbs. Again, safety. Herbs are toxic. Okay? That's the first thing they teach you. All of them. The ones in the health food store. So the thing that I want to kind of discuss is that an herbalist like myself should have some training in pharmacology. Right? You should know what these things do and what the chemicals in them do. So not just the guy at the health food store. So when somebody like your aunt or your cousin or your friend or the guy at the health food store tells you to take ginseng, don't listen to them. Because ginseng may not be appropriate for you. It's probably not. You guys are young. You don't need ginseng. Right? You may need something else or a different species of ginseng. So again, the other thing that I want to mention is that you may hear about rhino horn, you might hear about tiger bone. Chinese medicine, we don't use those things, right? They're expensive, they're hard to get. It's better to get something that's you have more access to, right? As opposed to something that's rare and expensive. It just doesn't make any sense. It's like, over here you see the whole herbs, right, on the bottom of the jars, and on top you'll see formulas. When I give people, I give the formulas on top. I don't give them the whole herbs. That's for display, because who's going to sit there and cook these things for 2 hours, right? It's about access and it's about compliance, right? You don't want to spend thousands of dollars on rhino horn when you can get something cheaper and just as effective. So we don't use any endangered species. Again, a little bit of history of herbs. Again, another folk hero, Shenong. He is responsible for agriculture and animal husbandry. He basically taught the Chinese people on how to farm and how to raise animals. And he has the first book that's, the Shenong Bencao Jing. So that's the first sort of compiled folk book of herbal medicine. We have some herbs in the Huangdi Jing that we talked about, but that's more of an acupuncture text. But think about herbs, right? They're wild plants. And think about, human beings and how they kind of got to where we are. We didn't just wake up one day and have food at the grocery store. We had a process. So early hunter-gatherer societies who were out hunting for their game and sources of food were kind of picking up off the ground. They were picking up plants, they were eating. So who's heard of paleo diet, right? That's a popular term, right? Who's out there hunting mastodons and wild buffalo? Nobody, right? But you go to the grocery store and buy, lots of calories. Back then you had to track it over the land. You had to follow these flocks and things like that, and you didn't have access to it all the time. So you were hunting and gathering, and in the meantime you were picking and gathering certain herbs. And the one guy who knew more about the herbs, like the medicine man, had a higher position within the tribe. Again, the Communist Party encouraged a cost-effective alternative to Western meds. Currently, the Cleveland Clinic, a lot of places use herbs in conjunction with Western medicine. We know that Western pharmaceuticals are very harsh. They cause a lot of side effects, right? So if we can temper, right, if we don't have to use as much of a dosage of Western medicine and use herbs to kind of moderate the properties, then we're kind of working together. It's not about either or. It's not about just acupuncture and herbs versus Western medicine. It's about working together and integrating for the benefit of patients. All right, a little bit of philosophy. Who's heard of yin and yang? Okay, so that's not some flaky New Age stuff. It's actually a very profound philosophical principle of how we treat polar opposites. Who's heard of the word qi? Okay, so we throw that term around. It's almost kind of like the Force in Star Wars, but a lot more than that. So this is the character for qi. This is the character for rice. This is a pot, and this is steam. Okay. So the ancients kind of saw how the rice we cooked and the steam came off, right? The rice gave you energy. They thought the steam off, the cooking was the energy itself. It was like kind of vapor. So we kind of threw everything together, and the word qi itself can mean a lot of things. It can mean air, gas, breath, vitality, and it can be combined with other concepts like, like lightning and qi together is the word for electricity, right? And that exists in your body. There's chemical energy, right? There's the energy we get from food. There's the energy we get from, taking oxygen in from the atmosphere. So there's a lot of energies that we use in Chinese medicine to work with. But when you hear the word qi now, hopefully you'll see it's like a bigger term. So yin and yang are polar principles, right? If I have fatigue and I'm tired, I have anemia, right? I'm weak. So what I want as a treatment principle is a tonic herb. And tonic, it's kind of an old outdated term, but it's more of like proper nutrition and vitamins, where you're getting the energy and resources to kind of treat your fatigue. And you're using, so fatigue is sort of like a yin condition, so we're using yang herbs to treat it. It's no different than saying, I have inflammation, so I'm taking an anti-inflammatory, the inflammation being a yang principle, hot, and using anti-inflammatories to cool it, right? So a lot of these terminologies are old, but the principle is the same. Properties of herbs. Everybody knows ginseng, maybe we heard about it. Ginseng is a tonic herb, right? It's supposed to give you energy, it's nourishing, and we know its properties in Chinese medicine are sweet and warm, right? And what does that mean? Basically, if we look at it in a pharmacological sense, we know that it creates blood cells, right? Hemophilia. It's an anti-narcotic. It's an immunostimulant. It helps and boosts your immune system to fight disease. It helps with metabolic issues, right? So it helps how you process, sugar, and it helps break down cholesterol. So we see how it helps the body produce energy, thus it's a time, right? And we see it with its pharmacological principles. Dandelions, you see them all over the place. Maybe you see some old Italian people on the side of the highway picking them when you're taking a car trip with your family. They are bitter and cold. Think about bitter, right, being nasty. Nobody likes the taste of bitter, right? Nobody likes bitter food. And cold is that, again, it may have like a anti-inflammatory property. When you examine it under a microscope, we know that it has an antimicrobial effect. We know that when you take dandelions, things like staph and pneumonia cannot thrive. That bitter property has a chemical property that tells these sort of bacteria to go away or not thrive. Maybe it doesn't outright kill it like an antibiotic, but it does help it from spreading and overwhelming your immune system. And again, we know that it has anti-inflammatory properties because it's cold, and we put it in a category of clear heat leaf toxicity. Ephedra is another popular one. Unfortunately, it's controversial. Ephedra was used as like a sort of like a speedy drug to help lose weight, right? But we don't use it for that property. We use it for asthma. When you have an acute asthma attack, you want to stimulate and use, a sympathetic response so that you open up the bronchioles so you get more air in. We're not using it to lose weight because if I have an underlying heart condition and I'm taking this stuff, I could have a heart attack. As a matter of fact, it happened to a pitcher who was using it for performance enhancement. That's why it's important to understand that herbs are toxic. It's very important that you know what you're doing and that somebody knows how to prescribe them so that they won't pay the trouble. So herbs are broken down into categories according to what they do. And part of it is just looking around you and seeing what they do. Release the exterior. So these herbs help open up the pores and get you to sweat, but they also have like a stimulating effect. And those are scallion, ginger, mint, and chrysanthemums, those over there. So next time you look at, mums outside, you might think of them as a different property. Clear heat, anti-inflammatory, we talked about dandelions. Downward draining, if we have digestive issues, we can use senna. Barley, right? Helps, it's like promotes urination. You spell wind damp. Okay, so wind damp is like that low back pain your grandma gets when it's about to rain, not the low back pain you have sitting at a desk. Transform phlegm, aromatic herbs, food stagnation, regulate chi, regulate blood, tonify. These are all the categories. Now, what we want to do with these herbs that's different than Western medicine is that we want to combine these herbs to get maximum effect, right? We don't just take one herb, we combine them together. Those are the boxes on top of the herbs over there. We're putting them together to treat conditions. Why? Because we want to combine and reinforce a certain effect, like a tonic. We want to treat multiple symptoms, right? It's not just a symptom. That's where we get into trouble. When we're treating pain with, pain pills and we develop addiction, we're not treating the root cause of the pain. We're not correcting the pain. Licorice is in almost every formula because it tastes good. These herbs have very harsh properties and you can taste them. One of my favorite formulas that's on there in the green box in the middle is 1,000 years old. It's been used to treat stress, and yes, stress is a cop-out. A lot of our symptoms are related due to stress. So treat the symptom, treat the root cause, which is the stress, and a lot of the stuff will come in line. Just like we said, modern diseases. And they follow the same categories as the single herbs. Now, acupuncture and herbs can be used together to kind of co-treat for a better effect. Now, if I'm treating inflammation, I could use acupuncture, right? I can use herbs together to augment, right? Like almost like a pharmaceutical delivery system. So if I'm using anti-inflammatory herbs and I'm treating inflammation, low back pain, I can put the filaments in, and I can also, once the circulation goes there will be anti-inflammatory herbal properties in the blood flow to treat things locally. If I have a spasm, right, my back is tight, I may want to use an herb that invigorates the blood, that increases circulation. So I want to get more blood to the area. So I use the acupuncture and I use the herbs together, and that's how the two work synergistically. All right, that concludes the lecture. I know it was really exciting. So chiropractic, if we look at the root word, chiropractors use their hands to adjust the spine. Acupuncture, we're using filaments to kind of pinpoint where the problem is. Now, You'll hear me use the term filament, right? And it's because I don't like to use the term needle, right? How many people here like needles? Not a lot. How many people like filaments? Yeah, everybody, right? Now think about that. Why don't you like needles? Because your pediatrician stabbed you with them when you were very young. And that memory is stored in there. Now, acupuncture itself works with that mechanism. If I say needles, you automatically think about your pediatrician, right? These needles don't actually hurt, right? They're filaments. And what they do is they help sort of like treat the body. Now, if you're thinking I don't like it, you're going to avoid getting a beneficial treatment because of the terminology used, okay? Any other questions? Go ahead.
Is that allergy test that they do in the back, acupuncture?
No, because what they're trying to do is expose your body to a pathogen and see what happens. But it's more of a diagnostic test. Acupuncture is the therapy. The goal is to help correct the allergy, not test it. Anybody else? I saw a hand come up over here. All right, everybody knows now where to go. All right, we're going to do a little demonstration. 15 minutes?
Yep, you have.
Okay. All right. Somebody else?
I'll help you.
Okay.
I'll do it.
Wait, I'll do it.
You need to say do it also. That's not gonna happen.
No, I
Somebody sitting here? All right, everybody. If you want to come and approach the bench, feel free. I'm just going to do a quick demonstration to give you an idea.
Do it.
All right, so these are the filaments, right? You can barely see them. You can come up and take a look and see exactly what I'm talking about. But if I take one out to show you, you're going to realize that they're very small, right? So maybe almost 20 of these fit into one hypodermic needle that your doctor would use for an injection. So first things first, what we want to do is contamination. We want to swab with alcohol to kill off any bacteria that might be pushing the body, causing infection. Eyes up here, ready? Here we go.
Oh my God.
And if you notice, the tube is a little bit shorter, right? And what I do is with a flick.
Is that better?
That's it. It goes in, it's painless. Now, if we backtrack to what we were talking about earlier, right? What we want to do right here in real time is bring the circulation to the ear. Not that there's a problem with the ear, but the ear itself is very good in regulating the ordinary flow. You guys are free to take a look. You're free to look at the table over here. You're free to ask any questions. You know what? I'm going to put one in on the other side. You guys are young. You don't really have any issues to deal with, so you don't have to worry about it.
Do it again.
What?
Do it again.
Do it again? I have a request to do another one from my media specialist.
Can you put it like in her eye?
That's a good question. I can put it, no. I can put it around her eye, but not in her eyeball. How's that? There are points around the eyes. You know, it's a very skilled technique. We can do this. Yes.
It goes here.
Between them, no. Yes and no. So yes, there's certain points that are mapped out on the body over time, right? And these points happen to be on like nerve levels, where a lot of nerves bridge out. You see a lot of nerves. a lot of like parts of the body, but it doesn't mean to say that if it hurts here, I can't go off the meridian or off the point and treat it, right? But most points, the ones we use highly, are mapped out on what we call meridians, which is a good mental note. I'll have a picture of that in my next procedure. But okay, let's go back to Otzi, right? We saw where those marks were, right? Those marks are actual points we use all the time. We don't randomly just put points anywhere. We can do that, but you get a better effect if you use some of these highway points that are very nerve-rich and have a direct sort of access to the nervous system. Yes?
You put it in your neck?
You can put them in your neck, yes, absolutely. You don't put them in your arteries. Okay, again, so good question. Here's what I tell people. You can train a monkey to do acupuncture, right? It doesn't mean he knows what he's doing, right? That's why it's important to have training and experience. You can put them around certain areas like the neck, right? But you have to be aware where the carotid artery is so you don't puncture it. Even still, these are small filaments. They're not going to cause much damage. But you still have to know not to get a minimize harm, right? That's what every doctor learns, right? Do no harm. So don't puncture your patient and cause them to bleed out. Know what you're doing. Avoid it. Put them in the eyeballs. Put them in the neck if they need it. If they need it. But if they don't, just be careful. So you said points. I thought where you're going with this, like length, right? You can't put them in certain parts have certain depths. Like I can't put deep in the upper back or in the shoulder or the chest because the lungs are there. Right? I have to know that if I put them in her upper shoulder, I can only put it in maybe 1 millimeter because the lungs inflate when you take a deep breath. If they're in too deep, they'll pulse the lung and you'll cause what's called a pneumothorax and you can collapse the lung. It happens all the time by people who don't know what they're doing. I'm actually consulting on a case right now, a doctor who thought that they could just do acupuncture, did it, caused a collapsed lung, and they asked my expertise to say, yes, this guy messed up because he did it wrong. He put it in too deep because he didn't know what he was doing. So punchline is, always go to an acupuncturist for acupuncture, not a physical therapist, not a medical doctor, all these things. Go to the right one. Safety first. Any other questions? I'm going to take these out. So another safety issue is like we always dispose of these in a sharps container. We never reuse them, right? They are sterile in the package. That means there's nothing on these. There's no biological life, no bacteria, no, check for bleeding, that's good. So what sterile is that when we alcohol swab it, we can probably kill 99.9% of all germs and bugs on the surface. But sterile means there's nothing on there. So we disinfect the area and we sterilize with sterilized needles, reducing infection, right? I've seen people actually needle through underwear. That's gross, right? You don't want that, right? These are people that aren't trained in clean needle technique. This is what differentiates, the men from the boys. People who know what they're doing from people who don't. Any other ways to treat conditions, right? Think about a scorpion and a centipede and their venom, right? What does it do? It paralyzes, good. And if you were to use it in, say, somebody who had like epilepsy, right, who had seizures, uncontrolled muscle movements, right, you could in theory use this. I actually had a patient who had severe epilepsy. He had such a seizure that he fell into a tub of running hot water and burned his skin, had to get a skin graft. The medication wasn't enough, right? He was on too much medication, and there was nothing else they could do with him. So they sent him to me, and I told my professor at the time, hey, you know what? I want to use this formula. And he said to me, you know what? You're the doctor. Go ahead. So using that sort of paralytic property of the venom, it helped kind of relieve his symptoms because the medication that he was on was not enough to control his seizures. So again, responsibility. Hunter-gatherer societies using natural herbs and critters to treat conditions. So please come by. Please grab a pen. I brought them here for you. There's a bag behind there once you run out. But also remember, at AcuHealthNJ, all the social media stuff. If you want to follow, there's more information there. Maybe you missed a couple points and you want to refresh yourself. Come on by and check it out. AcuHealthNJ. It's on the pen. Help yourself.
Hey guys, Colleen, you guys want to do it by like homeroom, and they can like cook, and then you guys can come to the gym? Sure. And then that way everybody's not like, okay. So you want to?
Or do you want to pass the pens out? Why don't we do that? Here you go. We'll start on this side.